Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be reading scary stories off Reddit. This story is posted by user ZO_2. This story is called My Experience. So me and my family went down to Texas for a funeral, and we were going to stay there for 2 days. We didn't get a hotel since my uncle lived right by the cemetery, and we wanted to save money because we were going to California in June. Anyways, when we got there, the house was big and everyone will have their own room, so I picked a room with a window looking towards the cemetery since nobody wanted it, and I didn't want to share a room with my brother. So after a while, it was 9-ish, and I was getting ready for bed. I was brushing my teeth, and all I heard was banging. I thought it was my brother trying to prank me, so I called him and see what he wanted. And he said he wasn't banging, and he went with my uncle to get some milk for the morning. And I didn't believe him, but he put my uncle on the phone, and he had the same story. So I thought it was someone else doing it, so I didn't mind it, and I went to sleep. I woke up around 3:30 to go get some water. As I was walking back to my room, I heard banging again, but it was loud, and I thought it was someone else. But who would be up at 3:30 in the middle of the night? So I went to my room to try to sleep it off, but right before I went to sleep, I heard a bang on my window, so I went to see who did it. I wish I didn't, because in the middle of the cemetery was a dark figure wearing a sombrero with glowing red eyes, and it was staring right at me. I didn't know what to do, so I locked my window, shut the curtain, and turn on the TV. I couldn't sleep that night. All I was thinking was that man. The next day I told my cousin, and he didn't believe. He thought I was making it up, so I didn't tell anybody else. So after the funeral and dinner at my different uncle's house, we went back, and I was tired, and just as I fell asleep, as soon as I hit the bed, but at 2, I heard the banging, and I was scared, so I ran to the window, and there he was, just standing there, looking at me. So I shut the curtains and went to sleep with the TV on, but right as I was about to sleep, I forgot to lock the window. And as I was about to go and lock it, I saw him. He was standing right by the TV. He was tall. I couldn't believe it, so as fast as I can, I turned on my lights. He disappeared. I jumped right out of the bed, locked the window, and I was doing that. I saw him for the last time. He was standing there, waving. That concludes this story. Let's find another one. I'm trying to look for a long one. This story is posted by user Hooker with a blank. The story is called Packed in Shadows. In a small, derelict apartment nestled in the heart of a forgotten city, Max sat surrounded by flickering candles, his face hidden in the shadows cast by dim light. He was in his 20s, but his eyes carried the weight of someone much older. His fingers trembled as he traced the lines of the ancient grimoire lying open on the table before him. The room was filled with the eerie melodies of Ghost, the rock band whose lyrics spoke to Max in ways he couldn't quite explain. Their music served as a soundtrack to his solitary rituals, a beacon that called to him in his otherwise gloomy existence. As Max began to recite the incantations he found in his late grandfather's journal, a chill swept the room, and the candles flickered wildly. Suddenly a presence filled the air, and Max felt a shiver run down his spine. Well, 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 what do we have here? The voice was smooth as silk, yet carried a hint of amusement. Max's heart pounded in his chest as he turned to see a well-dressed man standing before him, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. It was the devil himself, adorned in a tailored suit that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight. Satan, Max murmured, unable to summon any real power to his voice. The devil chuckled, his smile sending a shiver down Max's spine. You called, and here I am. What is it that you desire, my dear boy? Max hesitated, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Finally, he found the courage to speak. I seek power, he said, his words trembling with longing. Power to change my life, to escape this endless cycle of despair. The devil's eyes twinkled with amusement. Ah, the age-old desire for power. But tell me, Max, what makes you think you're worthy of such a gift? Max bowed his head, and his gaze fixed on the floor. I am nothing but a lost soul, he admitted, his voice barely audible. A black sheep in the family of saints. A failure in the eyes of society. I have nothing to offer but my desperation. The devil paced the room, his footsteps echoing in the silence. And yet, there is something about you, Max, he mused, his eyes never leaving Max's face. A darkness that intrigues me, a spark of potential buried deep within. Max looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You see something in me? The devil smiled, a knowing glint in his eyes. Indeed, my dear boy, I see a kindred spirit, someone who has tasted the depths of despair and yet refuses to be consumed by it. You may be a black sheep, Max, but perhaps that is what makes you truly special. It is something I am all too familiar with. As the devil spoke, Max felt warmth spread through his veins, a sense of purpose awakening within him. For the first time in his life, he felt seen, understood, and accepted. Will you help me? Max asked, his voice carrying the excitement of a child on Christmas. The devil's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Of course, my dear boy, but remember, all power comes with a price. And with that, the pact was sealed, the shadows closing in around them as Max embarked on a journey into the unknown, guided by the hand of the devil himself. But as he walked the path of darkness, he knew that he was not alone, for the devil saw him as not a lost soul, but a kindred spirit, a soul worth saving. I think that is a pretty good story. This story is posted by Wonderful Audience 60. The story is titled, Alert. Do not open any doors in your house. It was midnight. Everybody in my town was sleeping when the EAS sounded. Beep, beep, beep. Attention, all residents of the Nezadiah County. We urge you not to open any doors in your house, not to leave the house, not to any room. Stay in your current room. If there are windows in your room, use them to get outside. We repeat, do not open any doors in your house. Beep, beep. This message will repeat every hour until 12 tomorrow. I was confused. Don't open any doors? Why? Either way, I went to bed. I thought about the EAS, how strange it was. Should I really break out of my house through my window? Could I survive a fall from the second story? All the thoughts tired me more until I fell asleep. Tomorrow, I heard police sirens, and the EAS repeating again. It was 11:01. I looked outside my window. There were police with ambulances and trampolines to catch people jumping out of the windows. I forgot what had happened and walked to my door. I put my hand on the door handle, and just as I twisted the knob, I pulled my hand back in an instant, remembering what the EAS said. The police eventually got to my house. 2 men climbed the window and smashed it open, promising that they would pay for the damage. I got out and climbed down the ladder. I followed a crowd of about 20 people. We were going down the neighborhood with the police, helping the others, when we heard what sounded like a man, a woman, and 2 children scream bloody murder. One of the policemen turned on the radio. HQ, HQ, We have a situation void. I repeat, we have a situation void. Over. Everybody ran to the house. What I saw will confuse me forever. The house of the Martins was gone. Entirely gone. One thing left was an open door. The front door. Amelia Martin, Devin Martin, and their 2 children, little Aya and Eva, have been missing ever since. I had a dream last night. I saw Amelia. She was standing in front of a closed door. She opened it, looked dead at me. She said in a calm, whispering voice, "We're God's most beautiful creation, right?" That concludes this story. Kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger, doesn't it? Let's see what we should read next. The story is posted by a user who goes by the name of Unpronounced Title. This story is called, "Why Did I Press Play?" I remember the night vividly. The night I stumbled upon something I wish I never had. It was just like any other evening, scrolling through Reddit for a distraction when I came across a peculiar post titled, "The Forgotten Tape, a Haunting Discovery." Intrigued, I clicked on it, expecting a typical internet scare. This post detailed a chilling experience of finding an old VHS tape in the attic of an abandoned house. The uploader claimed the tape contained disturbing footage of something unspeakable. Skeptical, yet intrigued, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see it for myself. Ignoring the warning signs flashing in my mind, I embarked on a journey to the address provided in the post. The abandoned house loomed ominously in the moonlight, its windows shattered and doors hanging off their hinges. With trembling hands, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the air thick with dust and decay. My heart pounded in my chest as I made my way to the attic, guided by a sense of a morbid curiosity. There it was, tucked away in a dusty corner, the forgotten tape. With shaking hands, I inserted it into the old VCR and pressed play, unsure of what I was about to witness. What unfolded on the screen was a nightmare come to life. Grainy footage of dark, shadowy figures lurking in the corner of the room, their eyes gleaming with malice. I felt a chill run down my spine as I watched, unable to turn my eyes away from the horror unfolding before me. But it wasn't until the end of the tape that the true terror struck, a blood-curdling scream echoing through the speakers, sending shivers down my spine. In that moment, I knew I had uncovered something beyond comprehension, something that should have remained buried in the depths of the attic forever. As I stumbled out of the house, shaken to the core, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had awoken something dark and sinister. And even now, as I try to move on with my life, I can't help but feel like I'm being watched, like those shadowy figures are still lurking in the darkness, waiting to claim their next victim. That was a pretty good story. That was actually pretty scary. This is a story posted by temporary_paella_194. The story is titled, "How a Schoolmate Got Expelled Twice, Bullied Me, and got arrested at school." NSFW, content warning. To skip this, skip ahead about 3 minutes. Just in case this triggers anyone, warning, mentions domestic violence in detail, threatening school shootings, and underage drugs and alcohol. Okay, this one is a bit long and a doozy. It spans multiple years of interactions with this girl, whom I've had no qualms of saying her real first name. You'd probably find her on an arrest record somewhere. Anyways, this all starts during my 6th grade year, maybe 2017 to 2018. Middle school was a rough time if you've seen previous posts. I became friends with Gracie, who at first seemed pretty nice, along with her friends, fake names now. Kevin and Taylor were a little courtlet. We hung out a bunch, but it didn't last too long. Just a little disclaimer right now, all names in this story are fake. This is back when our school had their first year of Chromebooks, and they thought it was a smart idea to keep the FaceTiming feature allowed on email. So halfway through the school year, I was on call with Kevin and Taylor. Kevin was not a good influence. He was smoking, using vapes, and drinking beer while on call with us. But again, I was not the smartest teen out there, and talked to him regardless, though I never participated in any of the substances they would. Mind you, at the time of this event, it was around 11 p.m. at night. No one in my house was home. Both of my brothers were away at friends' houses, and my parents were on a date, so I was alone. At the time, we were all about 11 to 12 years old, so not the smartest, and definitely can't tell liars from far away. That's why this next bit scared the snot out of little me. Gracie ended up joining our call, which I didn't even remember what we were talking about before. With a red face, and tears streaking down in waves, she was trembling and sobbing, and immediately the three of us were on alert and trying to ask her what was wrong and what happened, etc. She then started to spin a tale of how her father started to hit her mother after she burned dinner, took one of their old vases from their grandmother and smashed it over her mother's head, enough for her to bleed. Gracie then said that she got scared after that and sprinted upstairs, even though she wanted to do something. She then told us that she can hear her mother screaming for help downstairs, pauses, then told us it just went really quiet. She told us how scared she was and that her father was going to get her too, etc. Then she told us she can hear him coming up the stairs and that he was calling her name. At this point, Taylor had run from her room and grabbed her mom and brought her back the call to talk to Gracie. Taylor's mom, who we'll call Abby, came into view and they started to try to calm Gracie down. Abby had grabbed her phone and dialed 911. She asked Gracie for her phone number / her mother's number for the police and her address, so they can send a unit to help her. Gracie proceeds to slap down a phone number and her address, but here's the kicker. Both were fake. It took maybe 5 to 6 minutes before Abby came into the room after getting information with Gracie with a pinched brow and pursed lips. She proceeded to tell Gracie that the address doesn't exist and that maybe she typed it wrong, and asked for her to send it again. Gracie went into hysterics and started sobbing loudly over the call again, saying her father was beating down on the door and he was going to break it and whip her. Abby became more frantic in her questioning, and Gracie sent another address before she said it had to be quiet. It was only quiet for a little before her closet door was slammed open and she screamed, slamming her Chromebook closed. Both me and the other two screamed in alarm and Abby told us both we needed to get off the call and go tell our parents what happened, and that she'll handle the rest of the situation. I left the call and immediately called my own parents and told them what happened. I was freaking out and confused, and they told me they wouldn't be home for nearly another hour, so they told me to go to a friend's house down the street. Mind you, it was about 12 a.m. at night, so apparently she called them and she met me at the door with cocoa heating up on the stove. They watched Disney movies with me and their daughter until we both fell asleep. The next day, when I went to school, Taylor pulled me aside and told me the rest of what happened. Apparently, both the addresses and phone numbers that Gracie gave her were fake, so the police couldn't confirm the story or give help at all. When the police looked for the first address she gave, it just went to an empty parking lot. The second address led to an empty warehouse. The police came to Taylor's house and arrested Abby for leading the police on a goose chase and wasting their time and providing false information/allegations because Gracie lied. Her mother was released 3 days later once they finally got the information out of Gracie's parents and her address from our school and interviewed them. Then Gracie was expelled when they figured out she lied about this information using a school platform to do so, and she got another parent arrested for it. She lied about the whole event of abuse and was sent to another school for the rest of middle school. Gracie called me and the others a few weeks after this, laughing, and told us that the looks on her face were priceless. Apparently the whole thing was a dare by another kid in our grade, Jules, male, because I rejected him a few months prior, and he wanted to get back at me. He gave Gracie $75 for doing it. Money was more important than friendship, I guess. However, expelling doesn't roll over to our high school. So 3 years later, she's back. This time, it's 10th grade, fresh out of COVID's hybrid year. We shared 5th period together, and our teacher, Mrs. R., who also got arrested that year, was a terrible teacher. Gracie was her favorite, somehow, even though she would constantly miss class, call Miss R stupid and ugly, cause scenes in the middle of class, yelling or screaming when she didn't get her way, complain about assignments, and just be a general pain in the butthole. She would throw things at me in the middle of class, scratch her sharp manicures down my arm or back, and nearly draw blood, saying it was an accident and that she didn't mean to bump into me. Then she nearly broke my Chromebook when she threw a small rock at the back of my head, which I only managed to dodge for it to hit my Chromebook instead, because I had my phone out recording her throwing insults at me and my friend the whole class period. By the end of the class, we gathered numerous spitballs, 5 half-eaten pickles, and nearly melted ice cubes, small pebbles, and other food items from the floor, our hair, and desks. Apparently, during our class, Gracie had emailed the VP about how me and 2 of my friends were bullying her and said hateful things, throwing items at her, and etc. It was the other way around, but whatever. So the VP had called our teacher to tell us and my 2 friends to come to her office. She gave us a stern lecture on bullying, and we showed her the stuff that Gracie had thrown at us, not us at her. But she just shoved it into the trash can right next to her desk and saying, "Lying isn't very good for young ladies." Then we started the video I recorded of Gracie bullying us, and only told me that Gracie didn't consent to being on video, so that just proves we were doing things to bully her. I then told her about how Alabama is technically a one-party consent state, and since I was involved in the conversation and consented to being filmed, it was viable in evidence she was actually bullying us. Our vice principal didn't care and said we were exaggerating, but she would talk to our class about it. So we were sent back to class with a warning to not do it again, regardless if we actually did it or not. The VP proceeded to come to our class the last few minutes of class. She poked her head in the door and told us not to throw things or bully others while looking directly at us, and then left. Nothing else was done about the incident, and our teacher didn't care because it was her favorite student that could do no wrong. Gracie took that as a signal to do what she pleased. She destroyed my assignments. She would steal work from my backpack if I left the room, claim I was cheating off her during tests to get me a failing grade. All the little things she could possibly get away with. Now towards the end of the year, Miss R, our teacher, had surgery on her thyroid. She came back to school a few weeks later. During the entire school year, she was miserable, irresponsible, and lacking in hygiene. She would walk around school and bathrooms barefoot, lay on the floor of her classroom all the time, yell at students, only giving us coloring sheets like we were little kids and not sophomores. And she hated me because Gracie did. It was a very unpleasant experience. This is where our last problem pops up. Miss R accidentally took too many pain pills during our class, and during sixth period that day, she hit a dab pen in the middle of class. Talk about a double whammy. Eventually, she got high enough that one of her students in sixth period annoyed her, so she started to throw stuff off the wall, ripped up posters, threw a stapler at the student, slammed her shoulder into a desk, threw anything in reach, chairs, pencils, wadded up paper, the whole time she was screaming. In a panic, one of the girls that was in JROTC raced out of the room to get Colonel M. Grabbed two of our resource officers and went back to the classroom and escorted Miss R out. Later that week, she said that Miss R willingly resigned from her position, and they brought in a different teacher from retirement because they didn't have a replacement, Mrs. B. Gracie was not in school that day, and when she learned what happened, Gracie was not in school that day, and when she learned what happened, she proceeded to threaten to shoot up the school and get her cousins involved and use their shotguns to light it up. She posted it all over social media. Not very smart, and kept doing that for nearly 2 weeks before the school found out from some kids that became worried in my grade. Gracie had come back 2 days prior to the school finding out, and she went berserk when they tried to get her out of class. She started screaming and hitting other students near her, ran past our resource officer in the hallway and started slamming on the classroom doors and screaming how she'd kill them all for what they did. She had hidden a steel crowbar in her backpack that day and started breaking windows in a hall further down the hall. The school went on to lockdown because of her. We were a bit confused because they didn't say it as a lockdown, just told us to stay in our classrooms as they would resolve an issue instead. But we had the door already open in anticipation of the bell and could hear her screaming from the other side of the main part of our school in my chemistry class. From other sources in the hallway she was in, apparently she'd hit the resource officer with the crowbar too, and so when the second officer got there, he tased her as she kept trying to hit them. They then tried to put cuffs on her, and she was resisting arrest, so they had to use brute force to get her down. Eventually, they escorted her out of the building, and the lockdown was lifted. The windows she broke stayed that way until spring break that year, when they can have enough time to install new ones. Last time I ever encountered her was the beginning of my summer. My parents own an outreach/thrift store in my town, so a bunch of people of varying ages go there to get help or shop for cheap prices for some of the name brands that are put out. I went in to help my mom tag some clothes in the back. Lo and behold, there's Gracie, standing at the register to check out, talking with my father. I walked over very subtly, to grab something from the counter, just a simple pen, and Gracie spotted me. She smiled wide and looked at me. Gracie proceeded to spout how good it was to see me, ask how I've been doing, if the school was good, what my summer plans were, etc. As if she had never bullied me in the first place. I stared at her flabbergasted, to be honest, because who has that kind of audacity? As she was walking away, I told my dad who she was and how she was going to his old school that he used to be a teacher at. He pursed his lips and told me the next time he sees her, he'll let her know she's banned from their store. I haven't seen her since, but she did try to add me on Facebook a few months ago. She's been henceforth blocked. Please don't scream at me for not going to administration for the multiple stories I will share on my experiences in my system or about bullying as I live through. They did nothing to help me in the moment, and in hindsight, it was really stupid of me to believe they would. They never really liked my family, as we were considered middle class, and how we always caused a ruckus in the office for how we were treated. Thank you for reading, and be careful of your bullies because they always go too far in the end. Alright, that one was actually a really good story. That was pretty good. So, my thoughts on that story are that maybe some people should be monitored more. I don't understand why they didn't immediately put the school on lockdown after she got to class, or like when she walked into the school, after she had made all those posts on social media about pretending to shoot up the school. Although she did cause a lockdown, and you know what? I don't even have any words. That story was actually crazy. It was a really good one, though. Next story. This story is posted by user/love3gen. For fear of anyone finding me, I will not mention my name or the company I used to work for. I need them to think I am dead. This is the first time I have spoken about it in 6 years. Authorities are not trusted. I did not mention this before. This story is called The Job from Hell, Part 1. I was 23 years old when I filled out the application with little hopes of actually getting hired. But when I was, I could remember feeling like this would be a forever job. I shortly came to hope for the opposite. It was a company factory specialized in making expensive, over-the-top toys for kids. Think about stuff like dogs that you can move and talk, dolls that you can play with too, companions when they are lonely. My job was quality checking. We weren't making sure the toys' voices weren't distorted, that there was no damage or malfunctions before they got boxed. I am sorry for that pause there. The job was easy, and for a month I never even noticed anything was wrong. Yes, I had co-workers, but we didn't really talk aside from greeting me when I walk in. It was when I tried to hold conversations for once that I noticed something weird. They didn't talk back at all. Hi, how's everyone's day going? Silence. Okay, bad, I see. You know, I was thinking maybe we could go out for lunch this week, get out of the factory for a while. Silence. It was only until I got closer that I realized they weren't human at all. They were humanoid like robots with zippers in the back of their necks, which I mistook for a uniform. That's when I realized I was the only real human in my department. In a rush to look for answers, I spoke to the only person I knew at the time. He worked in a different side of the factory where they did more creative and experimental work on the toys, seeing how they can improve them. We never really spoke about anything besides work, and I would only ever see him in the parking lot. But when I rushed up to him frantically, he seemed to understand. They aren't human, none of them. For months, I've been working alongside robots. Are you even real? I said, checking for the zipper on the back of her neck. Thankfully, he didn't have one. Instead, he had answers. My entire section is full of humans, but I work towards the main hall while you work on the lower levels. My team always jokes that the lower levels always drive themselves crazy before they could ever leave, but I never knew what that meant. I still don't really. I can't help you much, but I can say there's something weird going on. One day, one of our experiments begged to be killed like a sentient just before the cameras inside the room were cut for about an hour, and when I turned them back on, the experiment was completely silent. What do you think that means? That some of these experiments aren't just robots. Something else that I notice is that I don't know where these experiment rooms are. I just see the cameras inside the room, but never the hall leading to it. I know there are people close by because sometimes in the back I hear muttering that I can't make out the words from. My best advice was that you talk to the blueprint section, and you talk to the AI section. I know 2 real people who work in each section. That night I sat on all the information I obtained. My job was a lie. But that's the least of the problem. To find out more about my job from hell, It says in the story, like, share, and comment feedback for as this is my first story. That was actually a pretty good one. You know, I think I would go crazy. This story is posted by user mindless-meal 4293. My boss was always in his office. I now know the blood-curdling reason why. My name is Mark. I worked for Amazon. I deliver stuff to people. I get at least $100 a month. I tried to use the face thing. Didn't work out so well. Anyways, my name is Mark. I worked for Amazon. I deliver stuff to people. I get at least $100 a month. I have a condo house with my wife and two beautiful children, Anthony and Carolyn. Both my children were 10 years old. My wife and I were 33. Her name is Chloe. I loved my job, but until now, not anymore. My boss's name was Jim. He was a nice guy, although I wish he'd spent more time with us. He spent most of the time in his office. I was curious, but I figured if I asked him, he'd get mad at me and fire me. The past few days, me and my friends were too curious. I noticed cameras in one specific room, the warehouse. One specific area, the corner. The corner was very weird. One locked a drawer that not even a hair clip could open it. Today after work, I went into Jim's office. I found a key that could fit in the hole in the lock. I rushed over to the drawer excitedly. I opened it. And Chapter 2, The Search. I opened it and found a ripped out piece of lined paper. The girl lies at these coordinates. The girl? What girl? I was so confused. I drove my cord to the exact coordinates, chanting to myself the coordinates. I arrived. It was a lake. I looked around and found a sign that said Bear Lake, Colorado. The smell was gross. I wanted to vomit. I put on a gas mask and went searching for the mysterious girl. I searched for hours. This lake is huge. It must be 12 acres. I found this box in the river. It seems to be shaking with a mysterious noise inside. Thud, 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 thud. Like something was hatching out of it. The box shattered open, and there was a woman inside. Chapter 3, Katie. The girl was gasping for air. Help me, help me, the girl screamed. I looked around frantically. I found a rope, picked it up, and wrapped the rope around the box gently and tugged at it. The simple tug was enough for the box to be floating towards me. Once the box came to a stop and hit the land, the girl came out, shivering like a leaf on a windy day. Who are you? I asked the mysterious lady. She answered, Katie. That's a nice name. I told her. Thanks, she shivered. What's wrong? I asked her. My husband betrayed me, locked me in a box, and now I don't know what happened with my child. She yelled, Okay, just calm down. What's your husband's name? Jeff, she answered me, her teeth chattering. Okay, I'll find this Jeff, I said confidently. Are you sure? He's kind of insane. Really insane. Insane as in what? I answered her, confused. Insane as murder insane. She answered, Oh, well, you find shelter. It's getting late, and I'll try to find someone to help you. Thanks, she said. And I went on out. Chapter 4, Back in the office. I was trying to figure out what happened last night. Katie looked scared and confused. I told her to find shelter. At least that's what I hoped she did. she didn't know. Who knows what happened to her. My boss wasn't here today. Wait, the note! I realized if I didn't put the note back, Jim will notice it's gone and will know someone found out. He'll kill me. I placed the note back in a panic and went on with my day. I'll have to tell my friends about the encounter with the mysterious girl, Katie. But what if they'll snitch on me and tell my boss? I can't let that happen. All of that was racing through my head as I was sweeping the warehouse. I got a notification on my phone about a new delivery, an electric toothbrush. We hadn't had the delivery in years, I mumbled to myself. I hopped in the Amazon truck and went to the address, 999 McKinley Avenue. Once I arrived, I knocked on the door. Just a minute, muffled screams. The voice yelled. Just a minute, felt familiar. The man opened the door. It looked like Jim. Chapter 5, in progress, to be continued. For what we know now, this is actually a pretty good story, and I'm waiting for Chapter 5 to come out. Seems like a pretty good story. This story is posted by user CPT_boomslang. An odd break-in. My brother thought it would be a good idea for me to house sit for him while him and his girlfriend would be out in Florida for a few days. My brother Connor lived in Chicago with his girlfriend Elise. They lived in a small 2-story condo to get the layout of inside the house. As soon as you walked through the front door, you entered the living room. And next to that would be the kitchen. Right next to the kitchen would be the stairs that went up to my brother's bedroom, guest room, and bathroom. I agreed to do it and asked if I could bring my dog over. They both said it was okay since they both met him, and he said he was a good boy. I stayed with them for about a day until they went out and told me some general information before they left, like the home security password, that he kept a gun in his safe, in his bathroom, and Wi-Fi info. The first two nights were pretty much every night for me. A few buddies of mine said they were in Chicago as well, so I went and got a drink with them. On the first day, it was probably around 3 p.m. I got back to the house after walking my dog Moose. I realized that the front door was unlocked, but it was closed all the way, so I thought to myself that Connor and Elise came home earlier, so I went inside, placed the keys on the counter, and let my dog off the leash. But I soon later saw a pair of dirty footprints across the floor that led upstairs, and I was really confused since Elise was a really tidy person, so I followed the footprints upstairs. They led into the bathroom with a door cracked open, and I looked through it and saw a raggedy, dirty man sleeping in my brother's bed. And next to him was a small duffel bag filled with many of Connor and Elise's expensive belongings from the house. I took one small step back from the floor creak. The man lunged out of bed, bursting through the door and pinned me onto the ground. His grip was surprisingly strong. I couldn't move, even with one hand on me. He slowly pulled out a combat knife from his back pocket and threatened me with it. Then I started to look him in the eyes and saw that one of them was poking out of the socket, filled with fluids, and softly said, "You can't stop me." I tried struggling, then I successfully kneed him in the stomach, getting him on the floor, and started beating the ever-living crap out of him. And remember that my brother told me about the gun, so I quickly grabbed it and realized the man was gone. I heard my dog barking, so I rushed downstairs to see the man fighting my dog. So I pointed at him, told him to get the hell off him. He saw me, threw my dog off himself, and lunged at me. I took a shot at him, and it almost looked like he shrugged it off and started running again. I did 2 more shots, and he stopped. After it looks like he was done, I quickly grabbed my phone and called the police. When they arrived, They told me that this man was wanted for multiple break-ins and also said that he was an ex-Marine with a crippling drug addiction. I told my brother about it later, and instead it was okay. And it said it was okay, and he's just happy. Some people really need to fix their grammar on these stories or overview it before they post it. I wasn't harmed. After that day, I always made sure to be double secure. Pretty good story, aside from the grammar. Let's see. This story is NSFW. I am not sure what disclaimers to expect in this story, but to skip it, I'd skip around 7 minutes. The story is posted by user 3EEMO. The dog won't die. We'll work on typos later. Guess this is longer than your average fare on here. Jack brought the dog home on a shady... Alright, I am sorry, but I cannot read this story. I know he said we'll work on the typos, but I can't read this. I am sorry, you guys. The story... Oh! You guys remember Temporary Paella from, or 194 from a couple stories ago? Well, hear them again. First time I was stalked. It started in 5th grade. I wasn't a complex kid. I didn't have a phone, no social media. That wasn't allowed until near the end of middle school, and I only had a tablet I could use for certain times of the day. My parents weren't really strict, and since I played outside all of the time with my neighbors, I didn't really mind. It was to keep me from getting addicted to online games and developing a short attention span. To be honest, I'm grateful for it in hindsight. It made my peers' job of stalking me much harder. Anyway, a kid in my class, let's call him Damien, not his real name, was weird. I didn't know him for long, but he was the worst sort of boy. He'd pull out girls' bra straps in the middle of class, making a loud noise and telling the teacher the girls were distracting him. He'd tattle on you for everything, especially if you didn't include him in something. That's how this all starts. At the beginning of October of 5th grade, my best friend at the time, who I'll call Jane, also not their real name, had a strange sense of humor like I did. She didn't have any electronics at all. When we were younger, those fake chat stories they're all the rage over YouTube. So I wrote down a bunch of them with glitter pens and was going to give her to them at the next day in class so she could have something fun to read that evening and we could joke about it the next day. In comes this annoying, irritating, and obnoxious little boy, Damien. He threw a fit about not being able to look at the present for my friend. It got to a point that I just looked Damien in the eye and was like, "It's about girl stuff, Damien. You wouldn't want to read it unless you want to know how periods work." Obviously, I was lying, but this kid demands to read it anyways, as if he had a right to my belonging. I scoff and ask my teacher to use the restroom so I don't have to listen to him anymore, and he could calm down while I was gone. Apparently, while I was gone, Jane saw him root through my bag. I sadly sat too close to him. And he pulled out my gel-colored pens and started to write, He pulled out my gel-colored pens and started writing nasty things into the little packet I was going to give my friends using keywords such as murder, kill, and frick, and other curse words that would be considered inappropriate. When I came back, he ran to the teacher and tattled on me that I was threatening to kill his family and murder his friends if he told someone about it. Lo and behold, the teacher snatched the gift I was going to give to my friend, read through it, then looked at me with anger and immediately sent me to the office. Long story short, my parents were called and I was suspended for 3 days because of what Damien ended up writing in the packet of fake texts because I threatened to harm another student, even though I never did. And while my friend protested that Damien wrote it, along with this, they also ended up giving me a whole month's worth of detention, 2 hours before lunch every day. Just because when I was talking to my friend, Damien decided to eavesdrop on our conversation and tattled that I was spreading nasty rumors about some of the other girls in the grade, and he and I wanted to hurt them. When I was telling Jane, I heard some of the other girls say about her. So that's been the second strike on my record. That was the second strike on my record, and that's why there were so many detentions. My school was strict. Now that I have some basic explanations out of the way, I can continue about the main story here. After both of these instances, Damien continued to find little things to plant on me, rat me out for, or just bug me about in general. He went as far as to claim me and my best friend were lesbian and dating, but that I was cheating on her with a 6th grader. Like, no hate, but I do not like girls. I didn't really care about the rumor, but I was annoyed that he roped my friend into it. Finally, it all came to a head the next semester. We used to have to take 541 tests all the time, and our little sheets we wrote down on our little sheets we wrote down all our scores and signatures from the teachers on. We had our names and addresses on them so they could send them to our parents at the end of the 9 weeks to show that we were on track. Apparently, Damien had copied down my address while I wasn't looking and proceeded to convince his parents to get their driver by my house constantly to say hi to a friend, when all he really did was hurl insults at me or throw mean notes into my yard. He's rich. A bunch of people in my town would be considered rich. Majority of neighborhoods around me have large houses / mansions. We're middle class. He took pictures of me while I was playing outside with my friends and showed me the next day with the clip. I can't outrun him. That he knows where I live, so don't make him mad. It got super creepy when he started to print photos of me and keep them in his school binder. And I told my teacher and principal about it, but they just told me boys will be boys. What the actual frick? And that I shouldn't be looking into his private folders without his permission. Like, it should be allowed for him to have photos of me without my consent, when you can clearly tell in the photos I didn't know they were being taken. Even my parents didn't believe me, saying I was just making it up to blame the kid that got me in trouble. I wasn't lying, but all the adults thought that I was because I had already gotten into so much trouble that year with little fault of my own. But he kept harassing me, taking pictures, leaving notes in my yard and backpack, messing me up during reading tests at the computer. He would sit too close to me in class, watch me at recess, and try to hug or touch me all the time. No matter how much I complained or told adults, they just told me to be happy that a boy likes me that much. Again, what in the actual frick? This kept happening all throughout 6th grade. When it came to my first middle school dance, he got worse. He tried to take photos up my dress, tried to steal one of my heels when I put them aside so I could run around the gym with my friends, stole money from my purse, etc. I'm pretty sure he had an obsession with me. Distorted as it was, he would comment about my body during gym classes, would complain that I didn't wear shorts that showed my butt enough in 7th grade, and talked about how nice it was to look at me with a bloody nose and messed up hair. This was after I ran into the bleachers when playing Capture the Flag, and I tried to snatch it from his hands. He jumped onto the bleachers out of my bounds, causing me to not be able to slow down enough, and my shoes get caught on the floor, causing me to roll, getting burned on my arm from skinning it and slamming my head into the bleachers. That hurt like heck, mind you. After that comment, I tried telling the principal again of the situation. He didn't care, so I stopped trying. He continued with the behavior to the point where most days I couldn't bring myself to go to school. I would hide in the gym locker room bathrooms to avoid going out after roll calls, just so I wouldn't see him. At the end of 7th grade, he was caught with cigarettes with some other boys in the gym locker room, so his parents sent him off to military school. I bring up this whole story that was so long ago because you've just recently tried to add me again on my socials. I obviously blocked him, but even then, now nearly 5 years passed, and he still tries to keep in contact with me. I don't think I'll be prepared for a day I have to see him again. A note from the person who wrote this. Again, a true and disgusting story I had to experience. Find an adult that will listen to you. It's not worth going through this alone. And if you would like to hear any more of my life stories, comment and let me know. If you would rather hear about a time I got a girl expelled and how she fought off police years later, or about my brother's ex-best friend that was a child predator. What in the frick? I don't know if I have any words for this. What do you mean you should be happy that a boy likes me that much? I don't even know what to say. What the hell? Oh my fucking God. You know, that's just terrible. Let's see. Actually, this one isn't nearly as long as the ones we've just read, but I'm still gonna read it anyways. This story was posted by user sad_device_3069. Haunted by my deceased uncle. This started after my Uncle Stephen passed away in January 2015. He was a good guy who didn't take care of himself. Anyway, I went to his funeral, then I went home. I was around 8. And all was normal until a couple months later when I'm up late on a Friday night watching Adult Swim when I heard my front door unlock. I thought it was my dad, who at the time worked at a pizzeria that was 24/7 and mostly doing night shifts. So I look at the front door as it swings open, but no one's standing there. Okay. My dad is messing with me to scare me and is going to pop out in a second. Daddy, are you home? I said. No response. He likes to do this type of thing to me a lot, but this felt different. As I go to close and lock the door, thinking it swung open because of wind, I see a tall, big shadow go into my living room and into my bedroom and disappear. I knew this was my uncle as he had distinct footsteps, and the footsteps the shadow made sounded exactly like my uncle's. Anyways, I was scared crapless, so I run to close and lock the front door, go into the bedroom, shut the TV off, get under the covers, and think, what the heck just happened? Anyways, around an hour later, my dad comes home. He sees me sitting in bed, scared crapless, eyes wide, skin pale, dry mouth, like someone had pointed a gun at my head and was about to pull the trigger. He asked me, what happened? Why aren't you sleeping? As soon as he finishes that sentence, we heard a box of cereal fall on top of the fridge, and then I said, that's why there's a ghost in the house. He didn't believe me at first, but eventually believed me, as he had had a similar experience when he was my age anyways. This wasn't the first time my dead uncle visited me, and my family but this story was the most scariest and the most I can remember. That's actually a pretty decent story. This story is called Letters in the Attic and is by user Erutris. I probably butchered that name, but whatever. I inherited my parents' old house about a year ago. As a single guy in his mid-20s, this was quite a windfall. My mom had died of a stroke in the upstairs bathroom, a room I now kept mostly locked up. I never knew my dad. He split before I was born, but the house was something he left my mom before disappearing. It was a house that has been in his family for generations and was the only piece of my father that I had left. My grandparents had been dead before I was born, and my father was an only child. That being said, there was no real family to inherit the family estate when he was pronounced dead, other than my mother and I. As an only child myself, my father hadn't really gotten around to seeing any other brothers or sisters for me. I never really wanted for much. Dad's estate took care of the bills, my education, and the upkeep of the house. I always kind of wished he had stuck around if he'd gone that far, but I suppose it had finally caught up with him. Mom always says Dad was an eccentric, a scientist who studied weird stuff for a research facility, and whatever he did must have paid well because I had made it all the way through college without even touching the trust fund that my mom had set aside for me. And now I have an 8-bedroom, 3-bath mansion in need of some serious renovation. I decided to start with the attic. The attic has always interested me, even when I was a child. I used to like to play up there, looking into the old chest, peeking into the armories, and scaring myself with make-believe ghosts. It was nice up there, though. A stained glass window that overlooks the street always made little rainbows on the wood floor just for me. I wanted to clean it up a little bit and build an office up there so that I could do my accounting and bookkeeping in peace. The problem was that it was structurally unstable. The wall was a crumbling old brick, the mortar trying to let go for the last 40 years or so. I was afraid that I wouldn't take more than one good windstorm to knock it down or knock it in. And I really wanted to fix it up and work my way down. As I started to clean it out, I was delighted to find that the attic might actually pay for its own renovation. It was packed with old furniture and antiques that I found some interest with some of my local antique dealers. I took a few pictures on my phone and sent them to some of the antique shops, and they seemed all the more enthralled to get their hands on them. I separated off the things I wanted to sell, keeping a small pile of things I did not. After a couple of days of men with dollies coming in and out of the house, I found myself about $25,000 richer. The old attic had more than paid for its facelift, and I started looking at supplies to replace the old brick with. I don't know if I'd have to replace the beams behind it, but I suspected that I might. Mom told me that Dad had said the attic was one of the few original parts of the house, which had apparently been built in the late 1700s. It was one of the first large homes to be constructed in the area, and his ancestors had received it after some fellows working the land for him. They had been less indentured servants and more live-in caretakers. The man had hundreds of acres, a large farm, and several dairy cows that needed to be taken care of. My dad's forebears and their children have been more than up to the task, having recently immigrated from Ireland when he had left it to them all in his will. They had suddenly become very rich and very powerful in what was an up-and-coming part of the world. That would make the attic nearly 3 centuries old, and the fact that it was still standing was a marvel in itself. I had talked with a friend of mine who was a member of the code enforcement for the city, and he had told me to be careful when I started taking down the bricks. He said he was pretty certain they weren't load-bearing, but if the attic was as old as I said it would, then it could be an accident waiting to happen. I had been up in the attic during all kinds of weather, and I had never so much as seen it sway in the wind. Whoever had built it done an amazing job, and had certainly built it to last. As I set to work taking down the first of the brick, I did so with an ear ear out in a case, and I am sorry. I did so with an ear out in case I needed to run. I barely had set my hammer to work when I saw something sticking out between loose brick. It appeared to be an envelope, an old and yellow thing that likely would have crumpled to nothing if it had not been sealed up in the wall. I reached out for it, wiping masonry dust off of it. As I looked at the front, it was signed to my child from Marcus Krim, and it was dated 1934. This gave me pause. As far as I knew, there was only one Marcus Krim that had ever lived in this house, and that had been my father. To my knowledge, though, he had not been alive in 1934. I set the letter aside, not really sure what to make of it, and I kept working. The wall appeared to be held up not by wooden beams, but metal beams. That struck me as weird because the means to do so in the 1700s would have been difficult to achieve. They were crude metal beams, to be sure, but they were very thick and very sturdy, and had likely taken someone a very long time to put in place without a crane or some sort of tools. However, the architect managed it. This was tremendous. I would save a lot of my recent windfall by not having to replace the wooden beams that I had assumed that had been there, and had decided that the flaky wall was just a product of its own time. I was halfway through the north face of the wall when I found another letter. The front of this one read, "To my child, from Marcus Krim, 1984. The date on the letter seemed reasonable. My father would have been 12 years old in 1984, but I doubted that he was writing letters and putting them in a masonry. I set it aside, wanting to get back to work, but it was hard not to open it to see what it contained. This one had looked a lot newer than the other one, and I suppose it had spent a lot less time in the wall. Why was my father leaving letters in the attic for me? I didn't know, but I supposed that when I was done for the day, I might sit down and see what he had written me. By midday, I had found 5 other letters, and my curiosity was piqued. I had found one from 1984, one from 1934, another one from 1956, another from 1890, and a 5th one from 1854. They've been stuffed in the wall behind loose bricks popping out as I smashed the wall with my sledgehammer. As I broke for lunch, I decided that it might be time to have a look at them. I didn't know if this was some elaborate joke someone was playing on me or not, but the idea of getting letters from my father that I had never known was intriguing. Maybe the date were a code or something, and I wondered if there was some other treasure to be found in the house besides the antiques in the attic. I decided to open the letter from 1984 first, it being the closest to today's date. Inside was a handwritten letter in what I recognized to be my father's meticulous script, and I'd seen some of his journals from the library writing on physics and scientific theory, and I was familiar with the way he wrote. He marked the envelope with a stamp, I have no idea why, and it had been sealed with wax that crumbled as I broke it. Here's what the note said. Hello. As I have not learned your gender yet your mother insists that it must be a surprise. I will just call you child. I suspect you have questions. I wish I could answer all of them, but I fear this letter will be a poor explanation. Your mother may have told you that I was involved in an organization studying scientific principles. One of the principles they were very interested was time travel. It wasn't something I believed in, but was willing to take their money and study their theories. I thought the concept was so much hogwash, but as we began to make breakthroughs, I had to admit that there was actually merit to it. I began to get excited, thinking we might actually break the secret of passing backwards and forward in time. On the day of testing, we all drew straws to see who would be the first one to test the device. I drew the short straw, so I was placed inside the chamber. I played to not send anyone else after me because it appears that something has gone terribly wrong. I closed my eyes in 1998 and opened them again in 1984. We had done it. We could go back in time. But there was a problem. I had no way to return, and it appeared that my means of time travel was unstable. I arrived in December 1984, but 3 days later in September 1984. I was jumping backwards in time, little hops at first, but I suspect they might become progressively stronger as time goes on. I don't know how to contact you or if you will ever even find these letters, but I know the house has existed for at least 200 years. If I leave a letter in the attic somewhere, it's not likely to be stumbled across until someone is looking for something else. Maybe you'll find it and you'll know that I did not abandon you and your mother. You'll know what actually happened. I'm going to break into your grandparents' house tonight and hide this in the attic. I remember that tonight was when they left me at a sitter's house and went out to see a late movie. So there should be more than enough time to get in, leave the letter in the wall of the attic. I hope you'll find this well and that you are well. Sincerely, Marcus Krim. I was speechless for a moment, not sure what to make of it. Was this real? I had known my father was a little eccentric. Mother said that he'd toed the fine line between genius and crazy, but this was out there. My father been playing some elaborate joke before he left? Had he been trying to trick a small child into thinking that his father was a time traveler and not a deadbeat? I don't know, but it only made me more curious to see the other notes. I shifted through them until I came across the one from 1956. It was the next one in chronological order, and it seemed the best place to pick up the story. I opened it with a finger wincing as the old paper sliced me a little, but I'd sucked the paper cut, and as I spilled the paper onto the old desk I'd kept up here for the antiques, a few drops of blood spattered onto the blotter, but the letter was spared, and as I sucked I read what he had written there. Child, I have spent the last week shifting backwards every few days. Sometimes I would stay in a spot for days, sometimes seconds, but it seems I am destined to live my life backwards. I always seem to stay in the same town, the town I grew up in, and it's odd to watch the town slowly grow younger, opening your eyes to see the town shrinking a building at a time. I'd spent 2 weeks leaping backwards in time at various speeds, but when I finally came to rest in March in 1956, I felt jet-lagged. The town was half the size it had been. The cars were as different from the turn of the century as they would be in the early 1900s. People looked at me funny, my clothes likely appearing strange, but the money worked. The tellers would get a shock when they realized that they had bills that wouldn't be in circulation for 40 years, but I needed to eat. I didn't have a lot of money when I traveled. $100 and a couple of 20s in my wallet, but as the cost of things goes down, money stretches a little further. Your grandfather, my dad, is so young. I saw him playing outside the house, a boy of maybe 10 or 11, and it was hard not to hail him and talk to him. I plan to break into the house again when the family has gone and leave this letter in the wall of the attic. I better do it soon. Who knows how long I will have before I travel again. I hope you're doing well, and I hope your mother is also well. It's strange to talk to someone you've never met, but I hope these letters shed some light on where I have been and why I haven't been in your life. I was beginning to think that these notes had been left by my mother, but how had she so expertly duplicated his handwriting? All of my dad's journals were written like this, the same meticulous script, and it even sounded like the voice I had always given him when I read his journals. He always sounded like a scientist, like my science teachers had when I was in school. As I reached the next letter, I came across the one from 1934. The envelope was ancient looking, the outside yellowed and sealed in the same wax that others had been. The wax on this one was brittle with age, and I crumpled it, and it crumpled under my fingers as I broke it. I could just slide my finger under the adhesive, but looked in the desk till I found the letter opener. I remember seeing there a click slash and the note, and I had the note in my hand. Child. I went to sleep 2 days after delivering the letter to the wall and woke up 60 years in the past. This was the longest jump I have ever made all at once. And I had to write this one quickly before it sent me sailing off again. The town looks more like Mayberry from the Andy Griffith show than the bustling city I remember. Main Street is here, as is the post office and the police station, but everything else has changed. There are stores, but they seem less grand than the ones here before them. The house is still here, and I could see my grandfather as he sits on the lawn with my grandmother, both of them in their senior year of high school. Grandpa will get his draft notice in 6 years, taking him out to the steel mill before the explosion that kills so many, and probably saving me from never being born. Grandma will give birth to my father a year after that, and Grandpa will come back from France with few scars and many stories to regale his son and later his grandson. I never knew my great-grandparents, not well anyways, and it's odd to see them as they go about their lives. I've seen men going into the house the last few days, men doing work on the study on the second floor. I've managed to hook a pair of white overalls and a cap from the clothesline. Tomorrow, I will mingle with them and drop this letter in the wall, if I'm not years farther from where I started. I sorted the remaining letters, my work forgotten, and decided on the one from 1890. Next was the sequence. Though the sentence that was far out of whack now, my hand shook a little as I opened it with the letter opener. Fake or not, someone had gone through a lot of trouble to set this up, and the story was so good that I had to know how it ended. My work had been forgotten. There's mystery too much for me to put down. As the wax seal fell to brittle shards on my desk, I took out the thick and uncomfortable paper that had been laid into the equally heavy envelope. Child. It appears I sealed my letter in the wall at just the right time. The house was fumigated the next day and would have been nearly impossible to get back in. I also traveled again 4 days later, and this was one of my more hectic trips. I would be stuck in time for a day or two, but just as I would pen a letter, I would be dragging backwards into something else. As I've started trading my money for gold and silver as I go farther back. I'll soon come to the time when paper money means nothing, and then I might as well burn the notes to keep me warm. Gold, however, maintains its value as does silver, and so now I have a few actual dollars left, and some mintings of gold and silver on my person. I've got them hidden in a backpack that also seems to travel with me. I wish I had experimented with this a little more. But even though these letters were decades apart, I've really only lost a month at most. It feels like just last week when I opened my eyes in 1984, but I'm becoming worried that I might be slowing down a little. The last trip has brought me to 1890, and the town is little more than a general store, a saloon, and a collection of frontier businesses. I had to steal more clothes, my modern attire making me as an outsider. I'm thankful that I traded for gold. My money would have been useless out here, but gold is always useful. The house is still here too, but I've skipped 4 or 5 generations. The house is now a plantation. The land worked by field hands, and the house set considerably out of town. I went there to seek field work, but they thought I was a cousin who'd come to call. They'd put me up, showing a lot of old family hospitality, as I've heard about, which makes it easy to hide this letter. I hope I come to rest soon. I hope this stops. I go to sleep. I blink and my heart is filled with a dread of where I'll be when I open my eyes again. I hope you are well, and I hope you are living a better life than I am. I exhaled, looking at the last letter. This one was marked 1854, and the last one I had. As I picked it up, a thought occurred to me. How many more letters could there be in this walls? How many more could there be that covered several days in between the one I had found? I was no longer skeptical, quite the contrary. I was hungry for more, and as I split this one open, I held the brittle paper gently, afraid it would fall apart before the chance I got to read it. Child, my traveling is definitely slowing down. I spent 3 months with my forebears in 1890. Just after that, I spent a month in 1880, 2 months in 1870, and now I have landed in 1854. I have returned to the house again, claiming to be a cousin, and it's odd to see the same people who I saw in 1890 4 years ago, younger. The matron who invited me in is now a mere slip of a girl. Her brother, maimed in war, is now a healthy young man, passionate about state rights and the laws that govern man. I am embarrassed to report that the field hands I saw earlier may have been replaced with slaves, but I suppose that was to be expected. They accepted me into their home again, and I suppose I will stay here until I travel again. I hope you are well. I hope you do not hate me too much. That was it, but I felt like I knew where I could find the other letters. It was late into the night when all the bricks were torn down. I looked amongst the sign of I'm sorry. I looked into the rubble for any signs of paperwork. I'd started out being careful, an archaeologist looking for old bones, but after hours of fruitless plinking, I began to level the walls with abandon. I no longer listened for the groan of old boards or the crash of the ceiling. The iron bracings had held the attic up this long. They would do it a while longer. I searched and searched, looking for something, when I saw a metal glinting beside a bracing. I went to it and found a lockbox made of rusted old iron. It was a relic. The metal so old, it had begun to disintegrate in places, and I was careful as I knocked the lock off and pulled at the lid. I didn't think it would open for a terrible moment, but as it squealed apart like a funhouse door, I saw a tube inside with a wax cap on the end. Someone had written 1775 on the outside, and I opened it. I carefully dumped the fragile paper out beside the rest. If the paper from the last one had been fragile, then this one was almost elven. It felt like skin, and it was so thin I could almost see through it. The ink was thick and flaky, clearly done with a real pen. And as I began to read it, I had come to the end, or maybe the beginning. 1770. I've come as far back as I'm able. This last year was a series of travels back. Sometimes I might get as much as a week in one time, but usually it was hours. It seems, however, that I have to come to rest at last. I have been living on the land that will one day be our family home, and I realized that there was no old benefactor waiting for us to come to settle here. The land is mostly still trees, but I have come to the spot where our house will soon stand. I went into the town, the closest town I could find, and purchased it for what I would consider a pittance. The man at the trade office seemed surprised by the amount of gold I had on my person, but it seems like nothing to someone in our time. I had coworkers who'd begin laying gold back in the coming millennium. Sure that the banks would crash and money would be useless, but out here, money is nothing but paper and ink. I was able to buy 100 acres and secure enough supplies to build the house and start the farm. I have shown them how to make metal beams, something I took for granted in my world of metal and glass. The house will be strong, no wooden beams to break or bend, and I secured enough strong backs to help me build it. 1773. The construction is done, for the most part. The attic was difficult to build with the current level of technology, but I think we did okay. The house looks like it always has. And as I set up the barn in the fields, I've begun to loan money to those who are in need. The interest alone has made me wealthy, and I have become quite well known in the area. The workers I hired have settled land nearby, and I believe they are establishing the town that will one come past this house. I have lived here for 5 years and have not traveled once in all that time. I think perhaps whatever moved me has dissipated, and I am here for good. The town is doing well. They have established a general store and are now a steady trade route on the road west. I have men who work the land for me, who tend to the cows and the sheep, and I sit in my mansion and rake in the profits. Life is good, but I am aware of what is to come. I am no fool, and I know where this path will take me. 1780. I saw them today. They came to the house asking for work. My 8-time great-grandfather came onto the porch with his hat in his hand and begged me for a job. He said his wife would be happy to be my cook, and his children would help with the farm. That sounded fine. Most of the young men who had helped me build this house and work the land have gone to keep up with the chores around here. Have gone to fight in the Revolutionary War, and I have struggled to keep up with the chores around here. Thomas has 10 children, a good, big, old Irish Catholic family, and the youngest is old enough to help me with the day-to-day affairs on the farm. I agreed to hire them on immediately. I am the generous benefactor of my family, legends speak of, and I will be dead in the next 15 years. I may have stopped traveling, but I can feel my body aging faster than it should. 15 years is a long time, but I'm sure it will seem like no time at all to me. 1785. The war has been over for 2 years, but a lot of the men who went to fight haven't come back. I'm going to finish this letter and put it in the attic while I still have the strength. I am barely 50, but I look like a man in his 70s. I can barely make it up the stairs on a good day. I don't know how I'll live another 10 years, but I know that if I don't get to this wall, it may be my last chance. It's sobering to realize that I am the one who made it possible for those who came before me to live in relative ease. But I suppose that is the way of it. If you ever find this, I hope you won't hate me too much. It was not my intention to leave you, but I see now that I would have likely been a terrible father. My work held too much of my attention to ever take you to a baseball game or sit with you and spend an afternoon on the couch. I would have neglected you, and for that I am sorry. This appears it is my gift to you. Use it well. You never know when you might be called upon to make your own history. I love you, and I hope you are always well. Yours always, Marcus Krim. I sat at the desk and just looked at the collection of letters. It was my dad. He had built the house. He had set our family up. And he had died without telling me who he was. Without telling them who he was. It was unthinkable, and I realized I had no way to prove any of it. There would be no records going back that far. The original owner of this house had lived before the town did, and any receipts of the bill of paperwork would not have survived. I suddenly wished that Mom was here. She would have wanted to see these letters and would likely have believed them without a question. I wished a lot of these people were still here, but there was no one to substantiate these claims. I wonder if this was how Dad felt as he walked to town to begin building his house. Had he felt so utterly alone, knowing that his only real family was still 10 years away in a place he had never seen? I felt so alone, so utterly desolate. And as I sat there looking through the letters and thinking until the sun made rainbows through the stained glass, as it did, I saw them fall on something I had missed. It was wedged in the far back behind one of the braces as I walked towards it, like it might bite. It was another tube. This one, carefully placed so it wouldn't be jostled or broken when it came time for repairs. I opened it, and inside was a beautiful oil painting of a man sitting in a parlor downstairs. The blues look a little different. The curtains in the style of the late 1700s, but the man sitting in the winged back chair was something I knew. He'd seen his picture before, but he had traded his white coat for his dark, rich suit. His hair was short, more orderly, and he had grown a mustache, but I would have known him even if he had a beard. It was my dad, and I knew what I would find if I carefully flipped over the painting. Marcus Krim, commissioned 1774 by Warren Fritz. It's framed downstairs now, as are the letters Dad left for me. I think I'll cherish them more than the house, as well as the knowledge that Dad never really left us. He had always been there, making sure our way was smooth from a gap of generations. That was a great story. That was a wonderful story. That was beautiful, I guess. I think I'm going to wrap it up here as the video is now over an hour and 30 minutes long. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to these stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And leave a comment if you'd like me to make more of these stories. Thank you. And if you made it this far, you're a legend. Stay up, stay blessed.